So we are on our agenda down to our last hour, and we will be going through our slides on local church income reporting. So we've talked already about some of the other tax reporting and the way we do things, and now we're going to talk a little more about local church income reporting and then a few other lingering issues. And I want to finish up with our what's new for 2016, just kind of a review of the things that I hope that we will remember from our time today. So we'll start then in tab Q, where we're talking about completing a clergy W-2. There's always significant discussion around, does a clergy person get a 1099 or a W-2, right? So the answer to that actually comes from a court case, a decision in a court case that says a clergy person gets a W-2. So if you were giving them a 1099 in 1985, that is okay that you did in 85, but it is not correct now. So we have to give a W-2 for our clergy persons and any other employees of the church. Churches are not exempt from income tax reporting. So we have to do a W-2. So we have a prize for the person who can tell me, do you do a 1099 or a W-2? Raise your hand. Go raise your hand. Yeah. W-2. Yay, come get a prize. So this is kind of like a big deal, right? That it's not a 1099, it is a W-2. So it's important that we understand how to do a clergy W-2. So we have instructions in your tab Q about how to do that. There's the tax packet link on the GCFA website as well as on our website that will give more instruction, but we also have that here. So we're going to go through some of the basic things that goes on a W-2 just so that you know when you're completing that. Who in here actually does the W-2 for their church? So we do have some folks, so we will spend some time on that. So just going through the basic boxes on a W-2, obviously box B, that is your employer identification number. Each church should have their own employer identification number. If you are filling out your W-2 for your pastor and you notice that your EIN, your employer identification number, looks like a Social Security number, then it probably was not set up properly way back when and someone used their Social Security number. So you want to verify that. Make sure it looks like it's a proper employer identification number for a church. Then in box 1, this is the one we get a lot of questions about. What exactly is included in compensation? Your salary, any gifts that go to the clergy, any cash allowances that are not vouchered, so any cash that's given without the appropriate business documentation, any per diem or mileage that's given in excess of IRS rates. So for the mileage rate, 57.5 cents, but let's say your church said, no, we want to pay our church $1 per mile. Well, then the difference in that is taxable because it's above the limit from the IRS. Any taxable fringe benefits that are paid, which would include group term life insurance over $50,000 for your clergy. If your clergy is on our comprehensive protection plan, full-time clergy, and on our conference life insurance, then they do have group term life insurance over $50,000, and there is something to be reported on there. So that is age banded. It's a calculation that you can do. You can look all that up and figure out how to do it. You can also call Allison Smith in our office. She's our payroll accountant. She has a spreadsheet that she can plug some things in and tell you how much it is. So if you have a pastor on those two plans, then that should be included. They have a taxable benefit. Also, any non-qualified moving expense. So if your pastor moved this year, it was less than 50 miles, then they have to include their moving reimbursement. in for as taxable income, you would have gotten a letter from Allison Smith in our office telling you where to put this on the W-2. So you would look for that. If you've lost your letter, call her and she will tell you, because she's got a list of who received what and whether it should have been taxable or not. So let her know. Your Box 1 compensation does not include your pension withholdings that were done before tax. If your pastor does an after-tax plan, like the Roth that's coming, or after-tax on UMPIP, then it's in there. But a before-tax withholding is not in there. Housing and utility allowance is not in there. Health premiums that you have withheld from your pastor's pay on our conference group plan, that's not included. That comes out. Any accountable reimbursement plan payments. So if you had a business expense plan, continuing education, and you've done it through that plan with all the appropriate documentation, it does not go on there. If your pastor has a medical reimbursement account or a dependent care account that's properly set up, a qualified account, then that is not included. And there are certain other excludable fringe benefits. If you need more information, we can help you, because there are lots of examples for that. In Box 2, but before we move on your salary, we're getting to the time of the year that we love to thank people for their service. Pastor Appreciation Month, and also Christmas is coming up. So we'll be thinking about potentially love offerings or bonuses for our clergy. Those types of things, when they're done through the church, are taxable to your clergy person and should be included on the W-2. So if you take up a love offering at the end of the year to give to your pastor, the church collects it and you give it to them, church check or whatever, if the church is involved, that is taxable and is reported on the W-2 for the clergy person. Individuals may give gifts directly to the clergy person, and if they do that directly and it goes from an individual to an individual, that is only taxable subject to gift tax limits on that. But if it's not coming through the church, then it's not necessarily taxable. Now, could the IRS ever say that that was just a workaround because they paid them for the service they provided? That probably could happen. But for a payment that goes from a person to another person, then gift tax rules apply. If you receive that love offering and the church pays a bonus, then it is taxable. Question?
What if the pastor turns around and donates everything?
The question is, what if the pastor turns around and donates everything they are given? If the pastor is receiving a charitable contribution acknowledgement for that gift, then it is still income because they had constructive receipt of that, and if they chose to give it away, then that's a donation that they made, but they would still, that is still reported as income.
Same thing for weddings.
The question is it the same thing for weddings and such? If it is paid through the church, and the church is the employer, then it is payment for service. If your pastor is going somewhere else and doing a wedding and somebody else pays them, then that is something that he or she handles on their tax return as other income, and that doesn't come necessarily through the church. That's something that they handle when they do things other than at the church. But if your church pays it to them, then it is taxable. If you give them a birthday gift, and it's through the church, it is taxable. So all of these things are taxable because they're considered payments for service. Yes.
What about a love gift for music leaders that are all volunteers?
The question was, what about a love gift for a music leader that is a volunteer? The IRS would consider a payment that comes from the church to someone that provides a service to the church a payment for service. So that would mean that's taxable.
That's taxable.
What about you take up a love offering and then you split it amongst all the staff? Then it's taxable for whoever got it because it's a payment for a service.
So they just report it as other income.
Right, the question was, so they report it as other income, and yes, they do. It is reported as income. If you give them a W-2, then they get a W-2 for that.
Can you speak to the tax implications on people who make the donations?
The question is, can you speak to the tax implications of the persons who make the donations? For a person who gives money to the church, and let's say in this scenario, you say, we're going to take up a love offering, and then we're going to give it to our staff, we're going to split it out amongst them, and the church is making the decision, and people just contribute to that fund. In that case, it could be considered a charitable donation because they're giving it to the church and they're giving up control. Let's say that a person wants to make a donation to the church that is then to be passed through the church to a particular person, i.e. the pastor, passed to them. They are making a gift to a person, and that is not tax deductible. So that means that if they give a donation that comes in to be given to a certain person, then it does not go on their contribution statement because that is not a charitable deduction because it's a gift to a person.
Even though the person receiving has to count it as...
Right. The question was, even though the person that's receiving it counts it as taxable income, exactly. That is exactly how that works.
If a person is going on a mission trip and people are giving money through the church, the check is written to the person that's going on the mission trip. Is that tax deductible?
The question is, if people are giving money toward a mission trip and for a particular person and the check is written to that person, can that be tax deductible? When it is paid to that person, then it is not tax deductible. Now, let's flip side that. Let's say that your church has a missions committee that oversees the work of missions, and one of the work of missions that they do are overseeing mission trips. And you have a mission trip fund that people can contribute to, and then the missions committee decides who gets how much for their mission trip. If they're giving it to the church, not to a person, they're giving it to that fund, and then a committee decides who gets it, then it can be a charitable contribution. Now, in practicality, you can't only have one person that ever gets money, or then clearly that's a gift to a person. But it's the same thing with people, a local benevolence fund, for example. People want to give money to help out families if they can't pay their light bill or their house burned down or something like that. If you take up a donation for a particular person, it's not tax deductible. But if you have a benevolence fund that people can make contributions to the benevolence fund, and then there's a committee who decides who gets what, then that can be charitable contribution because you give up the control of that money, and it's a decision by the church. Okay?
So if you have, the church says, all right, we're going to give Joe a love offering for whatever, and people make the check out to the church, and the church gives him whatever, you're tax deductible because you made it to the church.
The question is, if you're going to take up an offering for the pastor and you make your check to the church, does that make it tax deductible? And it does not because it was for a person.
Gotcha.
Okay. So those are some of the things, particularly around this time of the year, that it's just important to know, just so that we're getting all of our proper income tax reporting done and can do our W-2s right when we honor our clergy and thank them for their service. So going on then on our W-2, then on our other boxes, and we're talking in particular about clergy here, because a clergy W-2 is different than a lay employee W-2. We're used to lay employees. We know what to do there. Clergy is different. Under box 2 is where you would put any tax withholdings. You can do voluntary withholding for clergy. It's not mandatory for clergy because they can do quarterly tax payments, but you could do voluntary withholding for them. If you did withhold for your clergy person, then you put how much in box 2. Boxes 3, 4, 5, and 6, because they are Social Security wages and Medicare wages, they are blank for your clergy person because clergy are considered self-employed for Social Security purposes. So you leave those boxes blank. On a lay employee, they would be filled out, but on a clergy W-2, those are blank. On box 10, if you had any dependent care benefits paid, it goes there. We don't have a lot of utilization of that, quite frankly, on our conference plan, but if you did, then it would be there. Box 12, your clergy contributions. This is where you're putting your other information, your other coded information. What we talked about with your group term life insurance benefits greater than $50,000 would be reported in box 12 with a code C. Again, Allison Smith can help you to calculate that if you've not been doing that already. Under box 12 with a code E is where you would report all of your 403B employee salary reduction contributions. So if your pastor is participating in UMPIP on a before tax basis, then you would put that there with a code E. And then under code P would be a qualified moving expense payment. So even if it is not reported as taxable income, you would still report it. This is in that letter that you get from our office that says where that would go on the W-2. So if you've had a pastor move and you had a moving expense reimbursement, then you would look for that letter and they'll tell you where that goes on there. For box 13, you check it if your clergy person is on a retirement plan. Box 14 is what I told you about with the other information. You may report housing and utilities there, but you don't have to. If you don't list it there, then you tell your clergy separately how much you paid. And then boxes 16 through 20 are your state and local wages and tax withholdings. We have some example information in W-2 that's in tab Q, so if you want to kind of look through an example, then you would look into tab Q on there. In tab R, you're doing your W-2, but you're also going to have your IRS 941 that you're going to need to complete and send in. You do not, if your clergy person is your only paid employee, then you don't have to do the 941 reporting. But if you have even one other employee besides that one clergy person, then you will have to do it. So there's instructions going through these slides about exactly what goes on which line when you're doing your 941, because churches are subject to doing these. So we've got each of the line numbers here that correspond back to that line on the form and exactly what goes there. Now at the end of the year, you have to go through and you're balancing out what you did on your W-2s, do your quarterly reports, and you're making sure that everything is balancing, and you see if you need to pay additional, if there's been an overpayment or whatever. And again, in tab P, you would have the letter that is from the IRS that clarifies if you have one minister and no other staff, then your 941 is not something that you have to do. But otherwise, if there's even one more, you do have to do that. Yes, if you are withholding on a voluntary basis for your pastor, then you would do that because you have something to report then. Okay? Also, for your clergy income reporting, you have to consider the other places that you have to report, including any state reporting. If you have state taxes withheld, you have to report that. You have the withholding forms that you're required to have, the W-4 and the NC-4. They recently, last year I believe, redid the NC-4 forms, and it wasn't clear to us. They said every employee has to fill them out, but then it didn't make sense for how clergy filled them out, so it was very confusing on that. We went ahead at the conference and just had our clergy fill them out anyway, and just right at the top, no withholding. so that we at least had them and could say we had them, because the instructions said you have to have them for every employee, but yet for clergy it didn't make sense. So that's another thing that you could do as well. You are subject to I-9 compliance. This is an immigration form where for every person that you pay, you have a certain documentation that has to be listed on this form that you have and in your personnel files. So you are required to have that as well for every person that you pay, and you're required actually to have it by their standards before you pay that person, so that you have clear documentation they're eligible to be paid. Then you have state reporting of new hires. This is for child support enforcement. So there's a separate form to be completed on ncnewhires.com that reports employees when they're coming into their new positions. And again, this is all around child support enforcement. On our church incorporation, we've included a lot of other topics that seem a little bit more miscellaneous as we go towards the end of our time. So I'll just stop before we go and ask if you have any questions on W-2s or 941s. If you have a situation in your local church, like in my local church, I'm a small membership church, and we do a couple of 1099s and one W-2. So I do not go to the post office and get those free forms that are, triplicate or whatever like that. We use a service that is just filemyforms.com. We use an online service, and we can just go on. I think it's $3.49 per return, and they handle mailing it to our employee or our contractor and reporting it to the government. So if you've only got one or two that you're doing, that's just something that you could also consider doing. That might make it a little bit easier for you, because once you get all of that entered, then they handle reporting that to the IRS, and you don't have to deal with that. Yes, ma'am.
When you pay the pastor or employee like Christmas bonus, is that considered taxable?
The question was, if you pay your employee or the pastor a Christmas bonus, is it taxable? And it is.
Do you put it under box 1?
The question is, do you put it on box 1? And you do.
Okay.
It is taxable. Any other questions on this before we move on? Okay. Then in tab S, we have information about church incorporation. We have some guidance and sample forms that are available for you on gcfa.org under the local church link. So there's information for you, plus we have information in tab S that we pulled from the GCFA legal manual. So this is just their section on incorporation. We do get questions on this rather frequently from churches, so it is good information to have. Our general church legal counsel does recommend that all churches be incorporated. It does make certain things easier, like applying for permits and things like that. It does make it easier. It costs a little bit of money to do that through the Secretary of State's website and filling out those forms and getting your bylaws and your articles together. So it does take a little bit to get done. It's not that expensive to maintain, but it's intended to help with ease of transactions that you do at the bank and other places, as well as some liability protection for your directors. In North Carolina, we do have general statutes that protect the directors and members of committees and local churches from the decisions that are made, as long as those decisions were not made with gross negligence or any malfeasance in those. So you are protected to some degree being a church committee member through our general statutes, but a corporation does help to insulate that a little bit more. So it's just something to consider. And in this document, if you are looking at incorporation, there's more information about the reasons why you would or would not consider incorporating your local church. We get the question most around daycares and whether a church should be incorporated separately from a daycare or a daycare incorporated as a separate ministry from the church, or however that variation goes. So there's a memo that's included in your materials that talks about that a little more with some advantages and disadvantages to that. I'm sorry. Okay. Jennifer just said for some reason that was left out of the copy, and to do that this year. So it's on our website, and we will, if you just email us, then we can send you a direct link to that. But it's in our training materials on our website also, so you'll be able to find that. That was intended to be in your notebook. For your local church insurance on tab T, another way that you protect the assets of the church is through your insurance coverage. One issue that we have frequently is around workers' compensation, and we receive questions on this quite a bit about whether or not a pastor is covered under a conference plan for workers' compensation, and local church pastors are not. So that is by the salary paying unit, and they're not on, the conference is not the salary paying unit for local church pastors. So churches are, it is recommended that all churches have their own coverage, workers' compensation coverage. So you want to check with your insurance provider and see if you have that. In North Carolina, you are required to have that coverage if you have 3 or more regular employees. So if it's a local church that only pays the pastor, then you may not be required by law to have that coverage, but we recommend that you have it anyway. We have had different situations come about where pastors have been injured, and if there's no workers' compensation coverage, then the church ends up paying those bills. Because if the health insurance provider, Blue Cross Blue Shield, finds out that it was an accident that happened at church, they will deny those claims. And in that event, the church ends up paying the hospital bills, plus any lost compensation, plus someone to come in and replace them while they're gone, and it could be a very expensive situation. Workers' compensation coverage is not that expensive, and you do have options available to you through United Methodist Insurance, so we recommend you, this is very important, that you make sure you have that coverage for your pastor. A particular situation around this time of year that I've used as an example for this in the past, it was not in our conference, it was in another annual conference, but a pastor was up on a step stool, hanging in the greens, right, so getting ready for Christmas, fell off the step stool, fell wrong, passed away. It was tragic for the church. There were lots of things to be paid. After that, the church did not have workers' compensation coverage. The family of the pastor was suddenly without income and suddenly in a very difficult position with hospital bills that came in from injuries and all that kind of stuff, and ended up having to sue the church because they couldn't pay it themselves, and it was a work-related injury, so the church ended up paying a significant amount of money for that injury for something that happens, you know, could happen very easily. I don't know if any of you ever fallen. Yeah, everybody has, right? I will tell you, when the conference switched to United Methodist Insurance, I was the first claim on workers' comp. I went out to a district event in what was the Rocky Mount District at that time, walked right in the church, fell down the stairs. So luckily was not injured badly, but did have to go get x-rays and things like that done. So it was a claim on workers' compensation, but we had it, so it was eligible through that. And Blue Cross, again, if they find out it's a work-related injury, that's why you get those forms after you've, you know, hurt yourself. You get a form that they want to find out who should pay for that. So please care for your pastor and do make sure that you protect them with that workers' compensation coverage. On the back of the sheet that's there in tab T, we also have minimum guidelines for insurance coverage for local churches. This is part of the Board of Trustees report that is approved by annual conference. So your annual conference has approved these limits as minimums for your local church, and you'll see that in general those are $1 million limit for pretty much everything, including $1 million umbrella that sits over all your other policies. So this is a paper to take to your insurance provider and just compare and make sure that you have those minimum levels of coverage for the local church in place for where you are. If you are interested, there is a program called United Methodist Insurance that is a denominational program, and they are providing insurance for, I think it's around 70-ish or 80 of our churches in the North Carolina Conference, but the conference also has insurance with them, and we're able to get, through United Methodist Insurance, better coverage even than what these minimums are at a competitive price. So we do, if that's something you're shopping around for at the local church for insurance coverage, you may want to get a quote from United Methodist Insurance and see if they can save you some money and give you better coverage for that. So just something to look for there. On your tab U, we have a document for you that is your state taxation and nonprofit organizations publication that gives you information around your sales and use tax. So if you at a local church are selling things on a routine basis, then you would be subject to collecting sales tax on those items and sending that to the state. There are some exclusions for that, like if you have one annual event like a church bazaar or something and you sell things, then they do have some exclusions that are listed in here. But and also if you have, they have like a thrift store, if it's run by all volunteers and all this kind of stuff, there are exclusions in there. But if you do things like, let's say you frequently get coffee mugs and you sell them, and you sell them to the church all year, it's the way you raise money for this or that, and it goes all year long, it's not a once-a-year event, then probably you are subject to sales tax on that. You should be collecting that and then sending it in. You're also subject to use tax. So that use tax means if you order something online or for whatever reason do not pay sales tax when you make a purchase, then the state says you should send us that tax that you would otherwise have paid, and it's called use tax, and you should send it to the state, and they thank you for that. Now, you can ask for and make claim for reimbursement of the sales tax that you pay. So even for the things that you buy, for kitchen supplies, paper towels, all that type of thing, you are eligible to receive a refund of the sales tax that you pay from the Department of Revenue. So there is a return, and it is Form E-585 that's in your documents here that you can use to make claim of that. You can, when you pay use tax on what you bought that you didn't pay sales tax on to begin with, then you can also claim refund on use tax. So you can fill out a form and say how much tax you should have paid, and then you can pay it to the state, and then you can fill out this form and ask for it back and receive a refund for it. So that is the proper channels for that. We have to do that at the annual conference as well. We claim refund of our sales tax that we pay. We also have to file use tax for anything we purchase that we don't pay sales tax, and then ask for a refund of that. So we do that as well. So that is not new. Nothing has changed there, but it is, you're not exempt from that as a church. You do need to be doing all of those things. Did you have a question?
Like Methodist vendor sells peanuts all year long?
The question is,
Stew or barbecue?
the question is if it includes Methodist men that sells peanuts all year long. And we would have to look at the specific situation in there about whether or not that applies to that, because I don't remember off the top of my head exactly the wording on their exclusions. But afterwards, we can look that up, and I'll be glad to help with that question.
But a one-time-a-year barbecue, you don't.
The question was, but a one-time-a-year barbecue, it would not. And I do remember that one from the booklet. If it's a one-time-a-year fundraiser, then they have excluded that. Okay. We also have some information that is available to you if you don't know what your, because we talk about your employer ID number all the time and how important that is. And we get calls frequently from churches. They say, we don't know what our number is. You know, we should have been given a W-2. We haven't been. Now we're going to do it, but we don't know what our number is. So there are ways to find out what your number is on the IRS website. And if you don't have a number, you've been using somebody else's Social Security number or something like that, then you can apply for one. And if you go to the application for employer identification number website that's listed here on the slide, then you will be able to apply for that number and receive your own. On tab V, in addition to paying sales tax and all of that kind of stuff that we need to do for a Department of Revenue, we also are required to consider what they call escheat property. This is unclaimed property. So you've seen the commercials on TV about nccash.com, about find your unclaimed money, there's money waiting for you that you never knew about, and all of that. Well, that money comes from people who owed you money in the past. They may have given you a check, you didn't cash it, and the check was sitting outstanding on their books, and you never got the money. So after a certain number of years, and different reporting periods for different types of money, you have to report those unclaimed monies or uncashed checks to the Department of Revenue, and then give them the money, and then they add it to the website, and then that's how people go about claiming their unclaimed property. So if it's 5 years and you still have a check that's outstanding on your bank account, somebody didn't cash their travel check for a particular month, and it's still out there, there are steps in the holder reporting guide that's there in tab V that you should go through that gives you, if it's above a certain dollar amount, you should send them a letter, and it tells you in this guide what the letter should say and what you should do after that. And then if they still don't respond to you, they still don't cash that check, or you haven't reissued the check, then it tells you what to do in this guide for sending it to the Department of Revenue so that they can start their proceedings. So all of our churches and all organizations are subject to this. So if you have checks outstanding, you can't just say, okay, after 3 years, they must have meant that as a donation, and then just kind of take it off the books. You're required to send that in to the NC Cash program. So that is also something important to remember, and particularly around as you prepare for doing your audit for this year. Those outstanding checks, look at how old they are, the type of check they are, compare it back to this guide and see if that's due, to follow those steps and see if you can get that back to those individuals. On tab W, you have some information that comes to you from our website. We do have, when we include an article in here about church management software, we get questions frequently about which system should my church use for accounting or tracking members or anything like that. There are lots of systems out there, and we don't have a recommendation for one system over another, because different things work differently in your local church setting. So this document gives you some ideas for things that you can look at. There are many churches where QuickBooks works just fine, or even Quicken in some cases. And there are other churches where their volume of transactions are too great for that, and they need a more robust system in there. So there are some ideas on there. There are other companies. There's a company called Cahaba Creek, and they actually give free versions to small local churches. So it's up to a certain number of vendors or whatever. You could use their system for free if it's a small church, but generally our larger churches, you would be purchasing that software. So there are just some ideas for you on there. And then, of course, on our website, we do have our training materials section that has all these documents. We'll be putting the slides up from today. They will go up there, as well as other documents. We have our frequently asked questions section of our website that just, it's just once a few people ask us the same question, we go ahead and put it up there. Just in case you're browsing through our website, you could just see some questions that other people have asked that may be helpful to you. And then finally, we have our local church finance email list. So it's open to anyone, pastors, treasurers, finance chairpersons, finance committee members, where you can join our list, and from time to time, folks in other local churches may send out questions to the group and say, how does your church do this, or how does your church do that? It may be helpful to you to be on that list. Jennifer does administer that quite a bit. There's a link to that on our website, but if you can't find it for some reason and you need more assistance, then Jennifer can help you with that. So we certainly thank you for coming today. We've got a few prizes left out here, so I'll go ahead and draw a name, and then we'll start taking some questions. Oh, Don, tell George Speak that we drew his name and he wasn't here, so we'll throw him out. George Speak is our conference statistician, so he will help you with your statistical tables. He's also Don's pastor, and he could not come today. Betty Roos. All right. Don. Yay, come get a prize. And then call one more, Pam Maston. Yeah, all right, come on up. So we have a few more minutes. It is about 3:15. We were scheduled to go to 3:30. So if you have any questions, then we can talk about those. Any questions? Well, let's draw names then, because we've got 4 more prizes. While you're thinking about a question. Linda Marcel. Yay. Trent Shelton.
He left.
You left. Oh, too bad. Peggy Ammons. Yep, come on up. And 2 more. David Houston. Yeah. And then we should have 1 more. Lauren Purcell. Yay, come on up. And I certainly, yeah, he'll get it. So that was you. So we certainly thank you. We do have a question. Yes, ma'am.
2 questions. Can you help me define?
Did they take it out? Did somebody take the prize?
Yeah.
Well, we'll find a prize. Catherine, we need a prize. Okay. We'll get a prize. All right, we have 2 questions. Yes.
Can you define for me what an advanced special is?
Okay, an advanced special. The question was, what is an advanced special? An advanced special is a way to give to a mission or a ministry that's been endorsed or approved by the conference missions committee.
So would that be like Methodist Home for Children?
Yes, that's exactly what it would be. There are examples of advanced specials in this booklet. There's a whole section on advanced specials. So it's intended to be for missions and ministry that are beyond the local church.
And then my other question was, you mentioned there were insurance plans available through the conference. Specifically thinking of life insurance plans for church staff. Any ballpark figures on what that looks like?
The question was around life insurance plans, in particular, but other insurance that's available through the annual conference for local church staff. And we do have our health insurance plan and life insurance. If you go to our conference treasurer's office website, there's an insurance section, and it lists all the rates and the benefits that are available on there. And then our conference benefits manager is Caroline Thornton. She would be your contact person for finding out if those plans are in place at your church or eligible for your church, because there's some provisions that you have to remember around providing health insurance. You know, when you offer it, you know, your group eligibility, you have to offer it to everyone in a certain, you know, that meets these requirements, and then there's some participation requirements. So Caroline can help you with that in your setting. Yes.
Thank you.
years, the auditor told me that, I don't know if it's 5 or 7 years, you have to revalue your fixed assets on the balance sheet. So you have to go in and you have to basically say, my furniture and fixtures are now worth this much. Is there a way we're supposed to do that? Is that you hire somebody to come do that?
The question was that their auditors require them to revalue their fixed assets every few years. And how would they best do that? And we, on our fixed asset listing, of course, we have, you would maintain the documentation and the useful lives of those. But as far as establishing a value on a used couch or something, I'm not sure if that's what they're talking about.
Like buildings, there's buildings on there, there's fixed assets and furniture,
right.
Vehicles are easy, but.
And on your buildings, that's something you could, so there are options for you could pay to get an appraisal. That's expensive. I'm not sure exactly what your auditor's getting at with that requirement to do it every 2 years. So we could talk to you about that a little bit more offline. I have not known of an audit requirement that you get an appraisal done every 2 years, but I don't know that particular situation.
Every 5 or 7 years, you're supposed to revalue them, I guess, so they're not undervalued.
We'll talk about that. We'll come up and talk about that.
That one of the important things about contractor waivers having a contract, do you have by any chance a template or something that we could use?
The question was if around an independent contractor that one of the valuable things about defining that relationship is actually having a contract in place. And her question was, do we have a template for that? And we do not have a template for that, but I do know that there are templates all over Google for that. So you could look through there. You're going to be very particular when you search up anything and use a template off the internet. Be very particular that you change it to your situation and that you personalize it for what you do and make sure it doesn't have legal provisions that don't apply or anything like that. So you just want to be very careful, but we don't necessarily have an endorsed template for that.
This contractor versus employee, let's say for this, the musician, do you have to go back and recalculate, say if you've been paying them 10 years as a contractor, do you have to go back and redo it for the last 10 years and then give it to the IRS, or do you just have to go back maybe the last 2 or 3 years?
The question was, if you had someone that you had been paying as a contractor that probably should have been an employee, do you have to go back and do corrections? So the IRS has guidance on doing corrections to W-2s. So I would presume that they would tell you that if you know a W-2 was wrong, then you would correct it. I bet that's what they would tell you. And they are also offering the program, and part of the program that they're doing with this voluntary reclassification program is they're saying that you list on there, we know we've paid them wrong, and it's been for these years, and we want to start now and fix it. And if they approve you under that program, then you do not go back and fix it. But, those are kind of the options that they would have for you is to, if you know that it's been wrong, you correct it, or you report it through this program and fix it prospectively. Yes?
The question, we're trying to raise money to build a new church. We have a program where you can buy a brick that's got your name or whatever you want to put on it. And that's an ongoing thing. It's not, how does that fall under tax, selling, sales tax?
The question was around buying bricks and
a
buying your naming rights onto a brick. I'm not sure if naming rights is different in this. I'm not sure. We would have to look that up afterwards just to make sure, because I don't know if it's spelled out specifically in there. Because in that case, you're not receiving a product, but you do have your name on the wall. So, yeah, I don't know. We would have to look in there and see if that says anything about it. Unless Chrissy knows, she's been our expert, and she's like Don't ask me. Any other questions?
We've got our mission committee that actually does fund some international mission work. You don't want that on that line, right? It's local only? And what's the definition?
The question was, if you fund international missions, does that go on local benevolences? And it would not go under local benevolences. That would be a program of the church.
So we would,
Right.
that would not go anywhere other than that.
Well,
It would go on programming expenses.
but,
Yes.
okay, so if you give like to an international missionary, not through the United Methodist Advanced Special Center, that's not considered a,
The question was, if you give to an international missionary that is not through the United Methodist Church, so it's through a different
right,
organization, which is okay, it's certainly okay to do, then would that be considered a local benevolence or a program expense? And I would say when it's very specific like that you contact Don's pastor, George Speak, because he's our statistician, and he can tell you exactly where that should go on there. To me, just my interpretation, when it is, if you have a program in your church where you support international missionaries and it's a thing you raise money for, you do all of this kind of stuff, then to me that seems like a program of your church. But if it's something that you're doing as a local thing and there's one particular person because you have a tie to it, maybe it could be differently, but I would contact George Speak and ask him that question.